No one is coming to save you. And the moment you truly understand, that is the moment your life starts to change. Most people spend years waiting for motivation, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for someone to notice their effort and step in. They call it patience. In reality, it is avoidance. Because as long as you believe help is coming, you don't have to fully commit. You don't have to carry the weight. You don't have to own the outcome. Here is the truth: most people avoid the absence of a rescuer is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. No one is supposed to save you, because the skills you need, the strength you're missing, and the discipline you're avoiding only develop when you accept full responsibility. The pressure you feel right now isn't there to crush you. It's there to force growth. The day you stop waiting is the day you stop negotiating with your potential. When you realize that no backup plan is coming, excuses lose their power. Complaints stop making sense. What's left is action. Quiet, uncomfortable, and necessary. This isn't pessimism, it's freedom. Because when no one is coming, you finally understand something most people never do. If it's going to change, it has to start with you. Radical self-responsibility is the moment a person stops outsourcing their life. It is the decision to accept that every meaningful outcome, good or bad, can be traced back to choices made, actions taken, or actions avoided. This idea is uncomfortable because it removes all safe excuses. It leaves no room to blame circumstances, people, timing, luck, or systems. But discomfort is precisely why it works. Growth does not begin with motivation or confidence. It begins with ownership. Most people live in a state of partial responsibility. They work hard, but only when conditions are favorable. They take action, but only after reassurance. When results are poor, they look outward. The economy was bad, the market was unfair, the support wasn't there, someone else had an advantage. These explanations may sound reasonable, but they are expensive. Every excuse delays progress because it shifts power away from the individual. The moment responsibility is shared, control is diluted. Radical self-responsibility does the opposite. It consolidates power. When you accept that your situation is your responsibility, you also accept that your situation is changeable. This does not mean life is fair or that obstacles are imaginary. It means that regardless of how unfair or difficult the starting point is, the responsibility to move forward still belongs to you. Waiting for fairness is passive. Ownership is active. This mindset forces clarity. When you stop blaming external factors, your focus shifts inward. You begin asking better questions. What skills am I missing? What habits are holding me back? What am I avoiding because it is uncomfortable? These questions are confronting, but they are productive. They point directly to leverage. Improvement becomes less emotional and more mechanical. Identify weakness. Apply effort. Measure results. Repeat. Radical self-responsibility also eliminates false hope. Many people stay stuck not because they lack ability, but because they believe rescue is coming in some form: a mentor, a breakthrough opportunity, a sudden surge of motivation. This belief creates delay. Why act decisively today if tomorrow might be easier? Ownership removes that illusion. When you accept that no external force is going to fix your life, urgency becomes natural. Action stops being dramatic and starts being routine. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from this approach. Not the loud kind that depends on validation, but the stable kind that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. When you take full responsibility, wins feel earned and losses feel instructive. Failure is no longer personal or humiliating, it becomes data. Something didn't work. Adjust and move forward. This emotional neutrality is powerful because it keeps momentum intact. Radical self-responsibility changes how effort is viewed. Instead of asking whether something feels fair or enjoyable, the question becomes whether it is required. This shift removes negotiation from daily decisions. The work either needs to be done or it doesn't. Feelings become irrelevant. Discipline becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Over time, this mindset compounds. Small, consistent acts of ownership build trust with yourself. You do what you say you will do. You stop waiting for permission. You stop needing encouragement. The gap between intention and execution narrows. Results begin to follow, not because conditions improve, but because responsibility was fully accepted. The hardest part is the beginning, when responsibility feels heavy and isolating. There is a sense of standing alone without guarantees. But that isolation is temporary. What replaces it is strength. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances aligning. The kind that operates even when progress is slow, recognition is absent, and motivation is low. Radical self-responsibility is not about being harsh or self-critical. It is about being honest enough to admit that the only variable you can truly control is your response, your effort, and your consistency in showing up even when no one is watching and nothing is promised. Waiting is one of the most socially acceptable ways to avoid responsibility. It looks harmless on the surface. People call it preparation, patience, or being realistic. But underneath, waiting is often a quiet contract with fear. It delays action while preserving the illusion of progress. The danger is not in pausing when strategy demands it, but in waiting for conditions that will never arrive. Most people are not waiting because they lack time or resources. They are waiting because action would expose them to discomfort, uncertainty, or the possibility of failure. As long as they are waiting, they can believe they would succeed if only the timing were right. This belief protects the ego. It allows potential to feel intact without ever being tested. But potential that is never tested becomes a liability rather than an asset. Waiting for help is one of the most common traps. People expect guidance, validation, or rescue before they fully commit. They assume someone more experienced will step in, show them the path, or remove the risk. This creates dependence. Progress becomes conditional on someone else's involvement. The problem is that capable people are rarely saved. They are noticed only after they move. Momentum attracts attention, not hesitation. Luck operates the same way. Many people quietly hope for a break, a connection, or a moment that changes everything. What they miss is that luck favors motion. Opportunities rarely appear in stillness. They emerge when effort creates visibility. Waiting for luck without action is not optimism. It is surrender disguised as hope. Permission is another form of waiting that keeps people small. Some wait for approval from family, peers, or society before pursuing what they want. They fear judgment, rejection, or standing out. This keeps decisions external. When approval becomes the gatekeeper, autonomy disappears. The longer permission is required, the less capable a person becomes of trusting their own judgment. The cost of waiting compounds quietly. Time passes either way, but the person who waits does not build skill, resilience, or evidence. Confidence erodes because confidence is not a mindset. It is a byproduct of repeated action. Each delay reinforces the belief that action is dangerous. Over time, hesitation becomes an identity. People stop saying, "I haven't started yet," and start saying, "I'm not the kind of person who does that." Waiting also distorts how difficulty is perceived. The longer someone delays, the bigger the task appears. What could have been managed in small steps becomes overwhelming. This creates a cycle where fear grows as action shrinks. The task did not change, the perception did, and perception drives behavior. The alternative is not reckless action. It is decisive ownership. Acting without guarantees forces learning. Mistakes happen earlier when they are cheaper. Feedback becomes immediate. Progress may be slow, but it is real. Even imperfect movement creates information. Information creates direction. Direction creates momentum. When waiting ends, something important shifts psychologically. Responsibility moves inward. The individual no longer asks what they are allowed to do or what might happen if things go wrong. The question becomes what happens if they do nothing. This reframing exposes the true risk. Inaction is not neutral. It carries consequences that are often heavier than failure. There is no moment when uncertainty disappears. There is no stage where discomfort is removed. Waiting for clarity is often an excuse to avoid commitment. Clarity comes after action, not before it. The people who build momentum are not braver or more prepared. They simply stop waiting sooner. Once waiting is removed, life becomes simpler. Hard but clear, there is less mental noise and fewer imaginary scenarios. Effort replaces overthinking. Progress becomes the focus rather than outcomes. The energy once spent on anticipation is redirected into execution. What remains is a quiet understanding that nothing meaningful begins with permission, rescue, or perfect timing, and everything meaningful requires a willingness to move forward while conditions are incomplete and guarantees do not exist. Discomfort is often misunderstood as a warning sign, something to be avoided or escaped. Most people interpret resistance, fatigue, or uncertainty as evidence that something is wrong. But discomfort is not a signal of failure, it is a signal of ownership. It appears when a person steps into responsibility instead of remaining passive. The presence of discomfort usually means that growth has begun. When responsibility is avoided, life feels lighter in the short term. Decisions are delayed, effort is minimal, and accountability is shared or ignored. This creates temporary relief. But relief is not progress. The absence of discomfort in this state comes from stagnation, not stability. Nothing meaningful is being built, so nothing is being challenged. Comfort in this context is deceptive. The moment someone takes ownership, discomfort follows almost immediately. There is uncertainty because outcomes are no longer theoretical. There is pressure because results matter. There is friction because habits are being disrupted. This reaction is natural. It does not mean the path is wrong. It means the mind and body are adjusting to a higher standard of behavior. Discomfort also exposes the gap between intention and capability. Wanting change is easy. Carrying the weight of execution is not. When a person commits fully, they confront their limitations directly. Skills are insufficient. Discipline is inconsistent. Focus is fragile. This confrontation can feel discouraging, but it is essential. Without seeing the gap clearly, It cannot be closed. Many people retreat at this stage because they assume discomfort means they are not ready. In reality, readiness is created by staying. The nervous system adapts. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What felt impossible becomes routine. This adaptation only happens through repeated exposure. Avoidance delays the process. Endurance accelerates it. Discomfort also acts as a filter. It separates those who want outcomes from those willing to pay the cost. The cost is rarely dramatic. It shows up as boredom, repetition, slow progress, and delayed gratification. These forms of discomfort are subtle, which makes them harder to tolerate. There is no adrenaline, no applause, no immediate reward. Just work that needs to be done again and again. Ownership requires the ability to stay present in that state without seeking escape. There is a psychological shift that occurs when discomfort is reinterpreted. Instead of asking how to make it go away, the focus becomes how to operate effectively within it. This shift removes panic. Discomfort becomes expected, even welcomed, because it confirms alignment with responsibility. The question is no longer whether something feels good, but whether it is necessary. This mindset reduces emotional decision-making. When discomfort is accepted as part of the process, mood loses its authority. Action is no longer dependent on feeling ready, confident, or inspired. The work is done because it is assigned by reality, not because it is pleasant. This creates consistency, and consistency is what produces results over time. Discomfort also builds self-trust. Each time a person stays with difficulty instead of escaping it, they reinforce the belief that they can handle pressure. This belief compounds. Future challenges feel less threatening because there is evidence of endurance. Confidence becomes grounded, not performative. It is based on experience rather than affirmation. Avoiding discomfort keeps life small. Accepting it expands capacity. The difference between stagnation and growth is not talent or intelligence. It is the willingness to remain engaged when things are uncomfortable and unresolved. Ownership does not remove difficulty. It reframes it. Discomfort becomes a companion rather than an enemy, a signal that responsibility has been accepted and that progress, however slow, is underway even when the path feels heavy and uncertain, and the absence of ease confirms that the individual is no longer waiting but actively carrying the weight of their own advancement. Independence is often misunderstood as isolation or self-sufficiency taken to an extreme, but in reality it is the foundation of freedom. Without independence, freedom is theoretical. It depends on permission, approval, or support from others. True independence begins when a person no longer requires external validation, rescue, or reassurance to move forward. This shift is not emotional, it is structural. It changes how decisions are made and how pressure is handled. Most people associate freedom with options, comfort, or the absence of constraints, but those are outcomes, not causes. The cause of freedom is the ability to operate without reliance. When a person depends on others for direction, motivation, or stability, their actions are limited by factors they do not control. Even if intentions are good, dependence creates fragility. Any disruption, disapproval, withdrawal of support, or unexpected resistance can halt progress entirely. Independence removes this vulnerability. It does not mean refusing help or collaboration. It means that progress does not stop when help is absent. The individual can continue executing regardless of external conditions. This capacity is rare because it requires emotional discipline. It demands the ability to tolerate uncertainty without reassurance and to make decisions without consensus. One of the biggest obstacles to independence is the desire to be understood. Many people delay action because they want others to agree with them first. They want alignment, encouragement, or confirmation that they are making the right choice. This keeps decision-making external. When understanding becomes a requirement, momentum slows. Independence requires the willingness to move forward even when no one else sees the vision. Another obstacle is comfort. Dependence often feels safer because it distributes responsibility. If things go wrong, blame can be shared. Independence concentrates responsibility. There is no buffer. Outcomes are personal. This pressure can feel heavy, but it is also clarifying. When responsibility is concentrated, effort becomes precise. There is no confusion about who must act. Independence also changes how fear is experienced. Fear does not disappear, but it loses authority. When a person relies on themselves, fear becomes a factor to manage rather than a signal to stop. This creates resilience. Setbacks no longer feel like personal failures or proof of inadequacy. They are simply problems to solve. The emotional volatility that comes from dependence fades because expectations are no longer tied to external responses. Financial independence is often discussed, but psychological independence is more important. A person can have resources and still be dependent if their sense of direction comes from outside. Psychological independence means self-direction. It means setting standards internally and enforcing them consistently. This internal structure allows freedom to scale. Without it, more options often lead to more confusion rather than more autonomy. Independence also enables long-term thinking. When decisions are not influenced by immediate approval or relief, trade-offs become clearer. Short-term discomfort is easier to accept when the individual is not seeking validation. This allows for patience, consistency, and delayed gratification. These qualities are essential for building anything meaningful. The process of becoming independent is gradual. It starts with small acts of self-reliance, making decisions without asking for permission, following through without reminders, solving problems without waiting for intervention. Each act builds internal trust. Over time, this trust becomes stability. The person no longer feels reactive. They feel grounded. Freedom emerges naturally from this state, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind. The freedom to act without hesitation. The freedom to endure without resentment. The freedom to pursue difficult goals without needing applause. Independence does not make life easier. It makes it clearer, and clarity is what allows sustained effort, consistent execution, and the ability to move forward regardless of who is watching, approving, or offering support. False hope is one of the most subtle obstacles to progress because it feels positive while quietly delaying action. It allows people to believe things will improve without requiring them to change. This kind of hope is comforting, but it is passive. It asks nothing and gives nothing. Clarity, on the other hand, is demanding. It removes illusion and replaces it with truth, even when that truth is inconvenient. Many people confuse hope with optimism. Optimism is a belief that effort can produce results. False hope is a belief that results will arrive regardless of effort. It shows up as vague expectations about the future. Things will work out. Something will happen. The right opportunity will appear. These statements sound harmless, but they shift responsibility away from the present moment. They reduce urgency. They postpone decisions. Clarity eliminates this delay. It forces a direct assessment of reality. Where you are, what you have, what you lack, what is required. This assessment can feel harsh because it removes comforting narratives. There is no longer room to believe that motivation will suddenly appear or that circumstances will change on their own. What remains is a clear understanding of cause and effect. If action is taken, progress is possible. If action is avoided, stagnation is guaranteed. False hope thrives in ambiguity. When goals are vague and timelines are undefined, it is easy to believe improvement is happening even when nothing has changed. Clarity tightens the frame. It introduces specificity, clear standards, clear expectations, clear consequences. This specificity makes inaction visible. It becomes harder to hide behind intentions when outcomes are measurable. There is also an emotional shift that occurs when clarity replaces false hope. Anxiety often decreases. While false hope feels comforting, it creates background stress because reality does not align with expectation. There is a constant sense that something should be happening but is not. Clarity removes this tension. Even if the situation is difficult, it is known. Known problems are easier to carry than imagined solutions. Clarity also restores agency. False hope places the future in the hands of chance. Clarity places it back in the hands of effort. This does not guarantee success, but it guarantees honesty. The individual no longer waits for permission from circumstances. They respond to reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. This shift changes how setbacks are interpreted. Under false hope, setbacks feel discouraging because they contradict expectation. Under clarity, setbacks are expected. They are part of the process. This expectation reduces emotional volatility. Progress becomes less dramatic but more consistent. Small improvements are recognized. Adjustments are made without self-judgment. Clarity also simplifies decision-making. When reality is acknowledged fully, choices become more obvious. Some paths are no longer viable. Some habits are clearly counterproductive. This can feel limiting at first, but it is liberating. Energy is no longer wasted on options that do not align with the goal. Focus increases because distractions lose their appeal. Replacing false hope with clarity does not mean abandoning belief in the future. It means grounding that belief in action. Hope becomes conditional on effort. Optimism becomes discipline. This form of belief is quieter but stronger. It does not rely on emotion. It relies on process. Over time, clarity builds trust with oneself. When expectations are realistic and actions are aligned, disappointment decreases. The individual stops promising themselves outcomes and starts committing to behaviors. This consistency builds momentum. Progress becomes predictable rather than accidental. False hope keeps people waiting. Clarity puts them to work. It does not soften reality, but it makes it navigable. It removes the comforting lie that something external will change, and replaces it with the demanding truth that change begins with deliberate action, repeated over time, guided by an honest understanding of where things stand and what must be done next.